Hey guys, it's the Metalblade 5, and I've been on this quest to gradual weeabooism since 2017, in which I felt like I kind of went overboard with anime videos, considering that I don't want this channel to become an anime channel. I want it to primarily be about games, but the show that really started all these anime videos off was My Hero Academia, in which we got Season 3 last year. I've wanted to make a video about Season 3 for some time because it was awesome, and I still love this show, but I put it off for a bit so that I wouldn't be constantly cramming anime down my viewers' throats. Plus, ever since making the Fairy Tail Impressions video, I realized that the format I used in that video was so much better than what I did for the previous retrospective videos, where I basically just gave a plot summary with few actual impressions here and there. Even though I actually target these videos towards people who've already seen the show, so they'd be like, "Oh my god, Metalblade has seen this anime I like! I wonder what he thought of it!" Which is why I go into spoiler territory. So literally retelling the story didn't make any sense. So expect me to adopt the Fairy Tail videos format from here on. After getting into My Hero Academia so much from watching the first two seasons, my anticipation and hype levels for Season 3 were through the roof, especially given the note that Season 2 ended on. So the wait between October and April felt like a long and grueling struggle. Then on the day that Season 3 began, I went onto Crunchyroll, saw that I needed a premium membership to watch the first episode, said, "Fuck that, I'm not waiting another week after all this time," and got a premium membership on the same day to find out that it's a recap episode. They pulled a Yu-Gi-Oh! Brains on me. Why would you do that? We had all this time to rewatch the show if we wanted to, but apparently we're too stupid to remember all that. Well, honestly, that was one of the few things I had issue with in this season, and it's pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. It just really irked me at the time. So to actual plot, shortly after Season 2 ended, I heard that the next story arc would involve the students going on a trip to a forest training camp. And to little surprise, I saw that was correct with a weird cat superhero team and dick punches! But everything changed when the League of Villains attacked. Shigaraki, capitalizing on Stain's ideology, got them a bunch of new recruits to form the Vanguard Action Squad in executing the plan. Of course, that means we've got some new villains for me to give my impressions on. Both Dabi and Himiko appeared at the end of Season 2, but they didn't do much, which was why I didn't talk about them. Now that's all changed. Dabi really creeped me out when I first saw him because... what's up with his skin? I don't even know if I should call it skin. It's more like he stapled his flesh over his skin. Dabi comes across as very emotionless and sadistic, which further plays the whole creep factor, and his lack of camaraderie towards the other villains gives me the impression that he'd have no reservations killing them if they got on his nerves and if he wasn't following Shigaraki's orders. This arc also shows that he's very ruthless in battle, as backed up by his quirk. Dabi's design made me think that his quirk would be dark or necro-based. But no, it's just fire powers. Dabi's quirk, unofficially dubbed cremation, lets him generate and manipulate blue fire that incinerates anything it comes into contact with. Once created, these flames can grow to exponential size and range, as seen by him setting the entire forest on fire to trap the students and pros. While Dabi isn't really prevalent in the second half of this season, I think that he has the potential to be a really interesting villain from what I've seen so far. But I can't mention him without acknowledging a bit of speculation. There's a popular theory going around that Dabi could be Shoto's brother. When I first heard of this theory after Season 2 ended, I didn't believe it for a second. But now I think it could be possible after seeing the potential hints. My only question is, does Endeavor have a missing son? As for Himiko, she creeps me out way more. Not from her appearance, but rather her personality. She's a psychotic serial killer who also has sadistic tendencies, but to a greater extent, as she even has this extremely messed up character trait of getting turned on by seeing people in pain, which causes her to develop a sort of crush on Izuku. She often acts like a child when killing or during casual situations to further complete the typical horror movie serial killer, and it honestly puts me on edge a lot of the time she's on screen because I get worried that she's going to snap and turn crazier than what she usually is. I don't know why I get that impression, but it's a gut feeling. When she fights against Ochako and Tsuyu in this arc, she made me feel really squeamish, solely due to the part where she's draining Ochako's blood with those syringe tube things. It was almost as bad as AC/DC's nails coming off in JoJo. At least this doesn't have some past trauma associated with it. I think Himiko's sheer level of creepiness alone makes her work well as a villain, since it clearly shows how dangerous she is. So don't take this as me saying I dislike her, she just freaks me out whenever she does anything. However, amongst the many new members to the League of Villains, there's one other villain who stands out. Twice. I freaking love Twice! In this series, there are plenty of characters who are based on Marvel and DC characters, and in Twice's case, he's pretty much Deadpool. He has a split personality between a rude, rebellious gangster and a suave, courteous gentleman that constantly switches. But he fully embodies Deadpool with how goofy, hilarious, and over-the-top he is, and I think you've all gathered how much I love characters with those traits. Twice makes me crack up a lot from the way he acts and how often his personalities contradict what the other says. Plus, he's a surprisingly upbeat character. Well, when he has the costume on, that is. Fully equipped with bladed measuring tapes. This correlates to Twice's quirk, Double. He can create clones of people as long as he knows their body measurements, in which these clones also copy the original's quirk. However, after taking a bit of damage, the clone turns into a mud-like substance. I really like the idea of this power, especially with the copying quirks aspect. I think it's both unique and cool. I was also really shocked to discover that Twice has a very dark backstory despite how he behaves. He created a bunch of clones of himself to do his chores, but then the clones rebelled, leading to him getting cut on the forehead, which resulted in his insanity and split personality. The clones then fought each other until he was the only one left, making him unsure on if he's the real Twice or a clone. Although, given the fact that he's been hit and hasn't turned to mud, I'm pretty sure he's the real one, but I guess he's so messed up in the head that he didn't think of that. Anyway, he joined the League of Villains because they accepted his craziness, and I do too. Twice is my favorite villain in the whole show, mainly because of the Deadpool reference, which is why I wish him and Mineta were playable in the fighting game. The rest of the Vanguard squad don't get as much screen time or focus, so I don't have much to say about them, although Mr. Compress is very classy and... What the fuck is that? So I'll mention just how much shit hits the fan in this arc. All while the ending theme creates massive mood whiplash. The students and pros are under constant attack from the villains whilst being cut off by Dabi's fire and Mustard's sleeping gas. Tokoyami's dark shadow goes out of control to become a giant monster that looks like the frenzy form from Sonic Colors. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I learned that they unleashed a fucking Nomu! But the most intense moment in this whole arc would have to go to the big fight. Izuku versus Muscular, whose name I honestly misread as Muscular at first, which made me think of the Star Spirit from Paper Mario. Also, in a massive coincidence, Muscular just so happened to be the guy who killed Koda's parents, literally several episodes after they explained Koda's past. Throughout this fight, Izuku is essentially a punching bag and is constantly inflicted with severe injuries thanks to Muscular's quirk, Muscle Augmentation, allowing him to enlarge his muscles to increase his physical strength and defense. So not only is Izuku taking quite a beating, he also has to use One for All at 100% and break his limbs just to contend with Muscular's strength, and even then he just blocks it most of the time. I knew Izuku was going to win, but this is a perfect example where the excitement comes from seeing how he wins, because Muscular just overpowers him for most of this fight. But in the end, it's all worth it, as Izuku beats him in the most epic and comebackish way possible. One for all. 1,000,000%, which doesn't mean anything. Delaware Detroit Smash! I thought, fuck yes! And God, that must have done murder on his arm. Now, I know I'm kind of making a much bigger deal out of this part than what it really is, but something that really bothered me in the next episode was when Izuku tells Mandalay to use her telepathy to inform everybody that the villains are after Bakugo. He tells her to say Kachan. Yes, Kachan is your nickname for Bakugo, but not everybody knows that. Mandalay didn't even know who you were talking about. See, this is why you failed to protect him. Also, question. Why doesn't Bakugo just blow up Dabi right here? His whole kidnapping could have been prevented. So when learning that the villains kidnapped Bakugo in an attempt to get him to join the League, I immediately thought, yeah, good luck with that. Cause despite Bakugo being an asshole and having serious anger issues, he isn't evil and looks up to All Might. That's part of the reason why I like him a lot. Speaking of All Might, in an epic scene, he, alongside a bunch of other pro heroes, lead an attack on the League of Villains headquarters and a Nomu factory, whilst Izuku, Tenya, Shoto, Eijiro, and Yaoyorozu go on their own secret mission to rescue Bakugo while wearing disguises. Okay, what the hell is with these disguises? The guys look like they're in a shitty boy band! But then shit hits the fan even harder at this point, because at the Nomu factory, All For One appears. To repeat what I said last time, I think that the idea behind All For One's powers make him a perfect hurdle for the heroes to overcome, as being able to steal quirks from others essentially makes him a Swiss Army knife of superpowers. Some of these quirks include Flight, Super Strength, Air Cannon, Spear-like Bones, Ragdoll Search Quirk, and Forced Quirk Activation, which looks really gross when used. Also, where is his face? Aside from looking like a potato, they definitely play up the intimidating aspect of All For One here with his incredibly eerie theme, and one of the first things he does being what I thought was killing Best Jeanist, but he somehow survived having a hole blasted through his stomach. Then the All Might vs. All For One battle that they've been building up for so long is finally here. While I think the action in this fight was really cool, with All Might taking a beam this time around, as All For One repeatedly interferes in his attempts to rescue Bakugo, and leaving massive amounts of destruction in his wake, this is one of those fights where the engagement comes from the emotional stakes rather than the fight itself, due to the build-up and history between the two. Part of that history being that All For One killed All Might's mentor, and the 7th One For All user, Nana Shimura. When All For One taunts All Might over this, it made me come to a sudden realization. Wait a minute. Shigaraki's real name is Tenko Shimura. That can't be a coincidence. And I was right. He's her grandson. Further raising the emotional stakes in my eyes as All Might laments over being unable to save Shigaraki in the past and feels like he failed Nana as her student. It came as a pretty big shock for me too. As for my impressions on All For One, I feel he's kind of a letdown as a villain in terms of his character. I think he's a very menacing villain given his powers, but across the entire fight, he's never given a motivation for what he does other than, I'm evil. And we aren't given any backstory on him aside from what All Might told Izuku last season. So he comes across as a very bland character to me, which I find very disappointing for the leader of the League of Villains. That's one of the other few issues I have with this season, and the biggest one for me. But then All Might brings one of the biggest highlights of this whole season by ending the fight in the most epic way possible. United Just awesome! However, with that last attack, the last of One For All's energy is used up, leaving All Might quirkless. At least he went out in style. It surprised me to see All For One straight up lose and get imprisoned, because when I learned that All Might and All For One were going to fight, I thought All For One would inevitably escape the scene so he could be an eventual final boss for Izuku. But then I realized that they're doing this sort of duality between Izuku and Shigaraki that makes this plot point work very well. They both lived in hopeless situations that they were then brought out of by their respective mentors, who they were trained by with the purpose of succeeding them. All For One being imprisoned is Shigaraki's equivalent to All Might losing his powers, as he now has to take on the role as the League of Villains leader. Much like how All Might tells Izuku it's now up to him. I'm never able to notice symbolism like that in stories, so I've shocked even myself. Although it still doesn't make All For One any less underwhelming. That was merely the first half of Season 3 over, so I was left nervous about what shit would happen next. So the second half of the season is the Provisional License Exam arc. I had heard the name of this arc before, but was under the impression that it would happen much later. Something else I had heard about before, much like the Dobby theory, was the traitor theory, where I first heard of it shortly after season 2 ended, but didn't know how big of a deal it was until the possibility was brought up in the show itself. I honestly have no idea who this traitor could be, if there is one to begin with, as I haven't looked much into it to avoid spoilers from the manga, and from just how many suspects I've seen accused. The most common suspect I see is Aoyama, but I've also seen people like Denki and Toru frequently accused. Getting back on topic with the current arc, when the students were making their ultimate moves, because I guess they learned about one's justice, and Izuku was told he couldn't put any more strain on his arms, I said, well, just kick then. I guess my own quirk is that fictional characters can hear what I say because that's exactly what he does with the new and very flashy, acrobatic, and cool looking one-for-all shoot style. I don't know why it's called that. Oh, and they pretty much confirmed that Ochako loves Izuku. Yes! How do the other girls not see her looking out the window though? When hearing the name Provisional License Exam, I thought something completely different to what actually happens. The first half is basically a Fortnite Battle Royale, yes, I hate myself for making that comparison too, whilst the second half involves rescuing these angry, screaming midgets. I was interested in seeing what the other hero schools would be like, and safe to say I found them all to be pretty weird. Aizawa has a giggly stalker, there is literally a girl with IQ-based powers named Psycho Intelli, and then there's this guy with meatball powers. And that's just to name a few. However, amongst the students from other schools, the one that stands out the most is Inasa Yorarashi from Shiketsu High. Inasa is all the weirdness from the side characters in this arc rolled into one. He's very hyperactive and bizarre in the way he interacts with others, being very loud and kind of obnoxious, which made me think I wouldn't like him that much. And for most of this arc, that was the case. However, I really liked the character arc they gave him here, as I saw him change quite a bit by the end of the season. He used to look up to all heroes, but after finding out how much of an asshole Endeavor is, he develops a deep animosity towards people with hatred in them. This grudge passes on to Shoto upon seeing hatred in his eyes. Admittedly, this was the main thing I didn't like about Inasa at first, just cause I think you all know how much I love Shoto at this point, so seeing Inasa act coldly towards him for what I believe to be an unjust reason really bugged me. I felt it was unjust because the hatred Shoto had was also towards Endeavor. Granted, Inasa wouldn't have known that, but he fails to notice how much Shoto had changed since their first meeting. When Gang Orca shows up in the second half, Inasa lets his grudge take front and center by arguing with Shoto, which then caused me to get a bit annoyed as Inasa failing to put his grudge to one side resulted in them both failing the exam. But it then led to me liking Inasa more as he realizes that he became the very kind of person he hated so much and patches things up with Shoto. If he appears more in the future, I'd be really interested to see how his character growth helps him grow as a hero. As for his quirk, Whirlwind, I think it's pretty interesting just for the elements. He can control the air around his body to create powerful gusts of wind. I've said in the past how I feel ice is such an underrated element. Well, wind would be the second most underrated from my view. Izuku seems to be impressed as he just stands out in the open daydreaming at one point with me shouting, "Stop fantasizing or you'll get hit!" You see? I got the introduction to another Shiketsu High student, Kami Utsushimi, who is another crazy person, or at least that's what I thought. Despite being crazy, obsessive, and violent, my hormones have to take over here as I see this thick, as the youngins say, girl in a black, skin-tight jumpsuit pressing herself up against a guy. I have the strangest boner right now. Just don't get me started on when she was naked. Yet my horny moments felt even more awkward when it came to the big twist that Kami was actually Himiko. Well, that would have been the case if I wasn't spoiled on the twist long beforehand. One's Justice already spoiled that Himiko's quirk was a transforming one, so when seeing that Kami also had a transforming quirk, I already had my suspicions. But it was completely spoiled for me when I rewatched the Kami scenes for reasons, and people in the comments pretty much confirmed my suspicions. I felt extremely cheated out of the surprise this scene should have had. I should have gone full-on Etika at this part, but nope! Given how Himiko needs to ingest the target's blood in order to transform, what happened to the real Kami? I'm scared. Oh, when Gang Orca shows up, they make the very next episode a filler episode that has nothing to do with the arc. It was such a troll moment. The episode is basically just an advertisement for the movie. They even use clips from the movie in the episode, with All Might teaching a hostage situation class to only the important students as a shoved-in story. They should have just made this episode an OVA. Hell, the tone of this episode is a lot like the two OVAs, rather than airing it at the most inconvenient place possible. Izuku even acknowledges this. I also felt like I was being kind of mocked by them promoting the movie when I couldn't see it due to them not releasing it in the UK. That's my only other noteworthy issue with the season, but like with the recap episode, it isn't that big in the grand scheme of things. It can't be a big issue when you have epic moments like Izuku and Bakugo's rematch after Bakugo figures out that Izuku received his quirk from All Might, which gave me a major oh shit moment. This is definitely the best fight of the season, United States of Smash aside. It has all the emotional and story engagement from the All Might vs. All for One battle, combined with the intensity of the Izuku vs. Muscular fight, and is presented as a super fast-paced, flashy, and fierce brawl, as thankfully Izuku doesn't hold back this time around, and comes so close to winning, except Bakugo turns it around at the very last second. Bakugo may be hot-headed, but he's actually pretty smart, and his whole emotional state during the fight really helped to make me like his character even more. When he blamed himself for All Might losing his powers from being kidnapped and considering himself weak, it showed me that he's very reflective in just how much he strives to become a hero. Then, after All Might explains the circumstances around One for All to Bakugo, he appears to be a little bit friendlier towards Izuku for at least the next day, so we also got some more character development. My impressions of Bakugo have come a long way since the beginning, where I thought he was just a nasty bully. As for the final episode of the season, there is the introduction of the Big Three. The top 3 students at UA, with the number 1 student, Mirio, who looks like the love child between All Might and Tintin, kicking Class 1A's asses whilst impersonating Terry Crews. Mirio just comes across as weird to me, but that's only going off of one episode. He does seem to be quite smart despite how he acts though, what with giving the students wisdom on how he utilizes his quirk to its full extent, that being the ability to phase through anything, including his clothes. Meanwhile, the season is effectively ended off with the tease of a new villain, Overhaul. I have heard about this guy a lot from manga readers, so when he appeared on screen, I freaked out. I know that he becomes a major villain in the series, and given how people talk about him, it seems like he's a massive deal in the manga, even for major villain standards. I don't know his backstory, what he does, or what his quirk is, and I would like to keep it that way for now to avoid spoilers. With Overhaul joining the League of Villains, the season ends on an incredibly ominous note, as Season 4 is confirmed. What I have to say in the conclusion is basically the same thing I said last time. I can't wait for Season 4 because I feel like the show just gets better and better each season, minus some small bumps along the way. None of the issues I had with the season has made me stop loving this show. The season gave us more unique and well-written characters, with the villains in particular getting the special treatment, and even added some complexity to Shigaraki's character, in addition to having tons of action-packed and emotional story moments. Basically, more of what I already love about the show. As I'm not a manga reader, simply because I don't think they sell manga in the UK, as I've never seen one in person, I have no idea what's going to happen in Season 4 other than Overhaul stepping into the spotlight. Although I am also a bit concerned just because I've also heard from a few manga readers that apparently the Overhaul story arc is really long and drawn out. Of course, those could just be their opinions, and I may feel differently when seeing how it's executed. I'm just excited to see what Overhaul does. However, Season 4 isn't coming out until October for reasons I don't know, even though they released an animated teaser in December. What, are Izuku, Bakugo, and Aizawa too busy being in JoJo to make it for April? I hope it don't sound like I'm bitching, because I'm not. I'm just left thinking about how I have to experience another long and grueling wait, even with me finally managing to watch 2 heroes.